Try that one more time. Good morning, Alan.
Good morning, Chanel.
There we go. Thank you.
Well, it's 8 o'clock, but I think I'll wait a little while because I think we have a quorum, but I haven't seen Ken Grant or Greg Freeze yet, unless I missed them.
Yes, Commissioner Hobble, the only commissioner that is not present is Commissioner Foster currently. And Commissioner Meyer established he was going to be excused this meeting.
Yeah, I recall that, but I didn't. Oh, there's Greg. Okay, I see Greg Freeze. When it's scrolling down here on the list, I must have missed something. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Let's see. Welcome to all of our guests. And Amanda, you're going to do the virtual meeting guidance today?
I am. Thank you very much. So good morning, commissioners, members of the public and staff. So we have a smooth meeting. I have just a few decorum rules for all of us. So first and foremost, please ensure your mic is muted unless you are speaking. Please state your name before speaking. In general, we ask that you have your cameras on if possible if you are speaking, though you may turn your cameras off if you're experiencing technical difficulties. And as a reminder, the public chat has been disabled, but you can still send messages to the host if needed. This meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube. So with that, let's have a great meeting.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. That will move us to announcements. Michael, do we have any announcements?
President Hubble, we don't have any announcements today.
Okay, so do we have any appearances by the public? Is there anybody in the public that wishes to appear? Give a minute for anybody to say something or raise the hand virtually. Okay, I don't see anybody. That moves us to the consent calendar where we have a number of items. We have the minutes from the last meeting, cash statement operating, review and approval of sanitary sewer extension plans, the American Center and Public Works improvements in Wanakee, adoption of interim financing resolutions, review and proposals award a contract for Nice Springs liquid processing improvements, phase 2, transaction amount engine generator number 1, emergency repairs, approval of transaction amount purchase liquid emulsion polymer, acceptance of work for the Nice Springs Valley Interceptor improvements from McKee Road to Dunn's Marsh, amend the capital projects budget for sludge thickeners number 1 and 2 drive and mechanism replacements. And then finally, we have review and proposal to award a contract with option to renew project team licensing, implementation, and training services. Anybody have any questions? Okay, I had 2 questions. For the generator, it has a value of 76,387 plus some change, and then plus another $11,000. So you're basically asking for $87,400 in total approval for this, right? Yep. And then
Yes.
Was this one of them that was just rebuilt, generator 1, a few years ago?
I don't know the answer to that question. Alan Grooms is on here. I know we're making it, these repairs are emergency repairs.
Yeah.
But Alan, can you confirm which generator this?
Michael, Eric is actually on and has his hand raised.
Eric, thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Hubble, both of these generators have had work done to them to upgrade them in the last couple years. Unfortunately, if you've read the car, these are emergency repairs from work done by a contractor that didn't properly shut down the generators or notify us of that work. So this action is for the repair of the generators. There's further district action to work with the contractor on resolution
Okay.
of financing.
I read
of
the
that.
car and I didn't quite, it made the comment that he shut it down improperly, but I didn't necessarily see that linked to the damage.
Right.
Okay, so that was the cause. And then my other comment or question was on, let's see, that last one, the renew thing with Mike Azzarello. So you're asking for a total of $306,160, given the fact that it's 83,160 and then another 4 years at the 223. Is that correct?
Yes, we're trying to structure these commission authorizations because there's work to be done, and then there's ongoing maintenance work for future years. So we try to predict what that total authorization will be.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Okay. Lisa Coleman's got her hand up.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Okay. So anybody else have any questions? Sorry about that. I just wanted to clarify that's what we're talking about. If not, do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Freeze. Second.
Wilson, I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Freeze, second by Commissioner Wilson to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor say aye.
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 And any opposed? None, motion carries. Okay, that will take us to topics where we've got the review and approval of the CED performance review process. Michael, you were going to lead this off?
Yes, I'll provide a brief summary for the commission. I'm first very pleased to submit for your approval the CED performance review process. The subcommittee of the commission did all the heavy lifting on this, realizing that a new approach was needed, and provided a clear direction to me and to come up with some options. I also want to thank BJ Rogers and Mike Lipsky for their instrumental role in coming up with the proposal that's before you. The commission reviewed this at a previous meeting and provided additional clarity on the proposal in terms of things they wanted to be looked at, and that include being clear about what the roles were between HR, the facilitator, the CED, and the commission, really asserting and being clear about what the commission's role, that they run this process, feedback on how do we handle feedback from owner communities, and also how do focus items and setting annual priorities fit into this. And so the changes that are before you are that we strengthen language on the commission's responsibility. We added an owner survey, a draft survey that's in there. We described the various roles in this process, and then addressed where focus item development fits in, and which is an asterisk towards the bottom, which is identifying those strategic priorities and my development goals before the budget process begins. You'll note also that the resolution not only repeals and recreates attachment 4 in the policy book for this new process, but also outlines a series of next steps for the work ahead to make this a successful process. And those are all enumerated in the resolution. One item I wanted to call out is that we want to scope in 2023, we'd like to work with the commission to scope an owner community engagement survey that could address many different types of important issues. And Amanda will be working with the commission this year on scoping out what an engagement survey would look like, apart from what can be done as a survey that's just for my performance. So there's 2 types of owner surveys here. There's one related to my direct interactions with owner communities, and that is the questionnaire that's in this policy right now. But there will be a second one in terms of an owner engagement survey that we want to scope out with you in this year. So with that, I'll pause, President Hubble, to see if there are questions from the commission or discussion about the revised proposal.
Okay, Tom, you have your hand up?
Yes, I'm going to put it down before I forget to do that too. Thank you. I actually thought this was pretty well put together, and appreciate the work and including some of the comments I made last time, which I think is going to make this a better process. I want to point out at attachment 1, the third paragraph from the bottom, where you talk about the engagement of the owner communities. And I would hope that, well, we should revise this. It's got, as part of this, the second sentence is as part of the CED's evaluation, owner community primary contacts, and then it has town administrators, mayors, etc. Although I'm so happy that we specifically noted town administrators, we probably should put administrators, because there's village administrators and there's city administrators. And it seems to me that perhaps, so administrators, and then I think we need to include like the sewer utility operators, like for instance, Bob Anderson in Westport or Tim Hurlitzky in Wanakee come right to my mind. So perhaps it should be administrators, operators, and then instead of saying mayors, chief elected officials. So I would have changed that paren to administrators, operators, and chief elected officials to cover, all the cities, villages, and towns that we have that are within our district. That was the only comment I had. Thank you for putting that together. And I hope that is acceptable to people when this gets approved to make that change.
Okay, yeah, I had some of the same thoughts, Tom. Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question, and thank you. This looks great. So thank you to the team for putting it together. It was a huge relief on subcommittee to be able to work with the staff team to get this done. So thank you. My question is why you chose to include the draft questionnaire in the policy book. It felt like that might change over time, or is just kind of too much information to typically go in the policy book. So I wondered if you had any rationale behind that. The questions look fine to me. It just seems like that could be outside of policy.
It absolutely could be outside the policy. I think it was helpful, since we're in this change process, is having those questions is very illustrative, and it demonstrates the types of questions and areas will be reviewed. And the old attachment 4 had the questions in them. But it might be too much for the policy book. And if the commission desired, we could just acknowledge those types of questions and streamline the policy book without them. It's just whatever you prefer.
My gut, and Tom's putting a thumb up, and so is Ken, is to take them outside of the policy book and just reference that there would be these questions to these constituencies year over year. But for this year, if it is helpful, I would be happy to make some sort of motion that could approve these draft questions to be used for this year, if that sort of approval would be helpful to keep us moving forward, because your next steps and timeline looks great. I don't want to slow anything down.
Okay, well, I do agree that there are draft questions after all, so I don't think they should be included in the policy book. So and if you want to, are we approving this by resolution? I think, right?
Yes, we are, and then it'll get circled into the policy book once it's approved.
Yeah. Okay. So, but are we approving your idea, Sarah, was to approve the questions as is for this year's use?
Yeah, that's more of a question. If that would be helpful, I'm happy to do that procedurally. Also happy to defer to staff or Paul on how we best.
I don't remember when I looked at the resolution, I don't remember it specifically saying anything about the question. So why don't we vote on the resolution? Or get a vote, or after further discussion, we'll get a vote on the resolution, and then we'll go back to you, Sarah, as a separate motion to approve the policy or approve the questions.
We have to split from attachment 1 the questions, because the resolution approved attachment 1 as proposed. So
yeah,
I guess my
So we-
motion would be to amend attachment 1 to remove the draft
Right.
questions from attachment 1 as part of our motion to approve the resolution.
Yes, right.
Okay.
So it's an amended
Oh, and-
resolution.
And Sarah, if
Amending
you
the-
could also add
amending
my
the-
comment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amending attachment 1 to remove the questions.
To remove the
Okay.
questions and to rework on page, the pages aren't numbered, page 3, third paragraph from the bottom to say the language, administrators,
Right.
executive, yeah, and I would
Yep.
leave et cetera. If I could, friendly amendment.
Yep. Okay. So do we have any further discussion on this? And then we'll, Brad, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, I guess a clarification of Tom's suggestion on who we survey with the owner communities. And I heard that something like it'll be the chief elected officials as well as some administrative people who operate the community's sewer systems. Was that the two groups that we were focusing on?
There were three.
Okay.
So to me, it seemed important from the discussion that we had before that we talked to the administrators. That's included. It just said town administrators, not inclusive of all. And it talked about mayors, which are chief elected officials. So you'd have town board chairs and village presidents, of course. And then it also seemed to me important that there are sewer operators that are involved here that actually have a lot of the local sewer operators that have a lot of contact with Michael as well. So my suggestion, which Sarah incorporated in her motion, was to change that parentheses to say administrators, comma, operators, and chief elected officials.
Okay, thank you.
And et cetera. Is that what we?
I heard remove, etc.
I want an
Okay.
et cetera in there because, you can include other people if you want.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay, all right.
Right. Well, there's engineers, like in Fitchburg, the utility engineer is typically the one that has more contact with the district than the administrator or but she might be considered the lead operator. So,
Thanks,
Okay.
Sarah.
And my only concern was that, whoever we choose to interview from each community should be somewhat consistent from community to community. That's all.
Mm,
interesting point. Yeah. Okay. So the idea is to approve the resolution, amending the attachment 1 to remove the questions and then to do the adjustment in, I think it's the third from last paragraph on page 3 per what Tom Wilson had suggested.
Tom Howell, did you get a second to Sarah's motion? If not, I would second.
Okay, so we had a motion by Sarah Estrich. No, I didn't. By Commissioner Estrich, and now a second by Commissioner Wilson. So I was going through that first before I got back to the. So, do we have any further comments, questions, or discussion? Okay, seeing none, we have the motion by Commissioner Estrich, second by Commissioner Wilson to approve the resolution, removing the questions from attachment 1 and then making that adjustment in that one paragraph. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? None, motion carries. Okay. So I gotta get back to the agenda here. And it's not moving down. Okay, so that will take us to item 4B, overview presentation on the changes to the commission policy book. Michael, you're gonna lead this off?
President Hubble, Commissioner Eskridge suggested a second motion for the use of the
Oh,
questions.
that's right.
for-
I forgot about that. I'm
for
sorry,
the,
sir.
for this
Yep.
year's review, and
Right,
this might
So-
be a time for that.
right. So we wanted to get a motion to approve the use of the questions for this year's review. So Sarah, you want to make that motion?
So I'll make the motion to move the questions that were in attachment 1 as draft to be final questions for use in the 2022 CED evaluation process.
Okay. So we have a motion to use the draft questions for the current year CED review process. Do we have a second?
I'll second that, Tom. Commissioner Clark.
Okay. Motion by Sarah Estrich, second by Commissioner Clark. Any further comments or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? None, motion carries. Okay, sorry about that. I slipped my mind when we're. Okay, so that will take us to 4B, the overview presentation, changes to the commission policy book. Michael.
Okay,
you're
I'll be
the lead.
loading up. Here we come. Load up my presentation. Okay, I'll be sharing with you revisions to the commission policy book. And let me see here. So if you can go to the next slide, Janelle, thank you. And what I'd like to do is to provide just a little bit of background and where we've come from with the policy book. Give you an overview of the major changes, have some commission discussion on those changes, and decide next steps. So that's what I plan to cover. Go to the next slide, please. This is a utility bill, something in our on our intranet that all employees have available to them. And it outlines kind of the sequencing of the different types of policies and guidance that we have at the district. I'm starting with Chapter 200, which is our legislative, regulatory rules, which enables us to do our work. The commission policy book is about how the commission wants to govern. And then the sewer use ordinance provides a lot of detail in terms of how we deploy Chapter 200, that authority that's given to us into specific things. And these three items are where the commission provides direction to staff for the most part. The employee handbook, you also approve, and then I develop administrative guidelines to implement your policies that you decide on. The budget is an implementation piece where it is supposed to align our resources with our policies. And then the strategic plan is always looking at where are ways that we need to adapt as an organization, and then maybe make changes to our policies or our priorities or sewer use ordinances. This is an iterative process. It's while it looks very linear here, as you know, we make changes or we approve a new employee handbook, and it many times establishes commission policy, and then we have to circle back and make sure it's in our policy book, and the same with strategic planning. And that's exactly what we're doing with this update today. If you go to the next slide, please. The policy book was created in 2017. When the governance changed in 2015 from a 5-member commission to a 9-member commission, it was time to create a blank slate and for the new commission to determine how they wanted to govern. And the district used a template for governance, for the policy book governance from the Madison water utility that used a similar governance template 5 years before us. So we used that as a basis and then took all the existing policies that we already had and merged them with this policy book and created one document. And that is what we've been using ever since. And since that time, we've made changes that should be incorporated into that policy book. You may recall the commission had interest-based problem-solving training in 2021, and what came out of that was a series of engagement guidelines, and those were developed and kept off to the side, and those types of guidelines are now in the policy book. There was a 2022 goal for this last year to update this policy book and really to focus on performance monitoring. And that was referring specifically to the CED review process. And so that was something why we're driving this change in the policy book now. The employee handbook was approved in 2022 by the commission. And the CED review process was just approved before this item. And then there's been awkward language since the beginning of this policy book. Some of the language that was expressed in the negative with executive limitations, such as thou shalt not fail to do something. And that was always very confusing and awkward versus why don't we just share what should be done? And so those were the things we wanted to try to correct in this policy book to right size it for the commission. And now that we've had 5 years of experience with it, to incorporate policies you've made and start to address some of the new language that will work for you now that we're using this policy book. Go to the next slide, please. So the major changes, and there's two versions in your commission packet. There's a markup version that shows all the changes, including these substantive changes and more, I would call editorial changes and some minor changes. And we replaced the outcome statements with owner expectations, which were approved by the commission during strategic planning. We're replacing the CED review process in attachment 4 minus the questionnaires. And we will be, and then we revised the treatment of staff language to be more consistent with the employee handbook, and then converted the executive limitations language to executive expectations language. And then finally, we included the commission engagement guidelines under commission policy 2E. So they are there to refer to for the future in terms of our process. Okay, next slide, please. So we have a couple options. One, and the one I'm recommending, is that there's a lot of information in these policies, and I wanted to just today serve it up and maybe some just initial discussion, and then return on February 9th with a study session. Because there's also things, there's still work ahead in the policy book. I know we have flagged that the financial policies need some significant updating from when they were written. There are also changes we may want to make in the commission agenda management and how you want to structure those agendas. And we should have some more discussions about that now that we have a new CED review process and performance monitoring. Those elements should be reflected in your process policies as well. And so what I'm recommending is we'll have a study session to start to identify these areas needing further exploration, to give me a policy agenda of things that I can start working with the executive team on developing new policies or revised policies. So that's my recommendation. And then, of course, the second option is saying, hey, we like these policies, the way they're written. We don't have any comments. Come to us at the next meeting and we'll approve them and incorporate them. So those are the options you have available to you. And with that, I will pause and turn it back over to you, President Hubble, and the commission for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Sarah, you got your hand up?
Thanks. Thanks for this work, Michael. Just a couple of questions. Process-wise, and also just expectation setting, I was thinking that we were not just updating the handbook from a policy perspective, but a lot of the work that needs to be done is more around reporting and kind of getting the how are we doing on these things in terms of the performance monitoring goal. I feel good about, right, we've done the CED performance monitoring goal and we've kind of put that in there. But as part of that, we were always trying to set expectations about kind of having more robust performance monitoring for organizational health. and that needed to exist so that we could more adequately separate that from CED performance monitoring. I'm wondering where you and the staff team are at on some of the more regular reports that we would be expecting to better implement, frankly, the policies that are in this policy book, and how that fits with how you're thinking about this round of policy book update.
We've drafted a dashboard report, a draft dashboard report. It's done. We've done it for 2022. And the process I have used is we've taken all of the 20 plus goals that were in the 2022 budget. And then as a team, we evaluated each of them on our performance from a green, yellow, red perspective. And I also added my professional development goals to that. And so that's done. And that would be the one for 2022. And then we've also have one completed for 2023 that I can start reporting on focus items for the first quarter of this year, the dashboard. And it's a draft dashboard. We're trying it, and the commission may say this is to better meet our needs. We'd like to see some changes to it. But what I'd like to do is put something out there for you to look at, see if it meets your needs for monitoring, and go from there.
I think for me, it would be helpful to join these two conversations a little bit then and see from a monitoring perspective that there's alignment. I mean, I'm sure there is, because that's the whole goal, but it would at least illustrate for me if we've done a good job of building out the report card to reflect the goals and the strategic plan as we've set it. How does that align or not align with our policies? Because that would be a nice way to understand if there are gaps in our policies. So just a process suggestion in a study session, at least for me, it would be helpful to consider those things together as really checks on both of them.
That makes sense.
Okay, Beth, you took your hand down. Did you want to speak?
Well, I took it down because Sarah covered kind of
Okay.
my questions and comments, so I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Okay, Grant?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think what Sarah's suggesting makes sense to me as well, and it just makes me reflect on, some of that work that a few of us did around like policy governance and just kind of reviewing that, and are we sort of doubling down there or planning on using some modified form? So I think this does make sense then to kind of be that time where that conversation is sort of happening as well, because to me then, if the intent is to sort of go as hard as we can in that direction, as I understand it, we probably need more frequent and kind of very specific kinds of reports in order to, kind of fulfill that idea of policy governance. So maybe, I think it's a really good time while reviewing the policy handbook to make sure essentially all of those policies have, some equivalent monitoring, right? Some element on the report. And is that an annual report, or is that, like the contaminant levels in our discharge, is that on the monthly, or, what's the best way for us to monitor that without getting, in the way or into too detailed things that we've charged, the CED to do. So I think it's a timely conversation. I think having both sides of it makes a lot of sense to me too.
Okay, thank you, Grant. Anyone else? So Michael, when do you think you'll be scheduling the study session? I know we had some dates available.
It's February. It's our next meeting, February 9th.
February 9th, so that will be in person?
It will be in person.
Okay.
And I'll facilitate this. This has been a great discussion, and Commissioner Freeze also sent me some ideas from his review. And what we do is we'll get these topics up in a discussion, and then I will build a work plan around addressing these questions that you're raising. And we may not resolve them all at this study session, but I think my intent is to get them on the table, and then let's start working towards them.
Okay. Good. So a more comprehensive review with the outcomes, making sure that we have kind of that flow chart, so to speak, of the flow process. Okay. So everybody, the next meeting will be in person, will be the study session on the policy book. Okay, any further discussion or comments or questions? So you do have the red line version of that. If you think of anything that you want to, that's important, you can always email or contact Michael in between now and the next meeting with any suggestions or comments or whatever. Okay. Seeing nobody else, we'll move on to the Chief Engineer and Director's report.
Thank you. Thank you. I have 3 things to report. I've been giving you periodic updates on how we're doing on our 2022 budget expenditures. And so I want to provide you with an update on how we're looking on the 2022 budget. We are at this point $700,000 over budget for operating expenditures. And as Todd presented at the commission regarding our end of year revenues, we're $400,000 under budget revenue, which gives us a total deficit of $1.1 million. We are still paying 2022 invoices until the end of February. And so this number will change, but not for the better. This last year, our operation and maintenance costs were $2.1 million over budget expenditures, while all our other departments were $2 million under budget. The majority of the expense deficit includes absorbing labor that's been charged to operating fund instead of a capital fund. And it is really important to emphasize that we are not spending more. It is just the allocation of where the labor is charged. The final numbers will be confirmed by the end of February, and I will return to the commission on March 30th. It's on our commission calendar with a request for a budget amendment. And I will also provide much more detail in terms of explaining why we went over budget, the situation we have, and then answer your questions. So with that, I don't know if there's any brief questions, but I just wanted to let you know where we're at right now with the budget.
Okay, anybody have any questions, Grant?
Yeah, thanks for the update, Michael. Just on that point about it, it sounds like I don't know. I guess is it a majority of the additional expense because of that sort of misallocation to operating instead of capital for labor, or?
It's I wouldn't call it a misallocation. At the beginning of the year, we estimate how much staff time will be charged to capital projects, and it's engineers, it's operations and maintenance staff who are reviewing plans and specs. And just through the nature of the work this year, there's been more upfront design and planning work, and there haven't been as many opportunities to connect and do the work of capital work. And so what it means is we were off in how we estimated what portion of time would be charged. This is a problem we can solve. It's more an administrative challenge because when the commission approves 3 budgets, our operating budget, our capital fund budget, and our debt service budget. And so we can solve that. And I know we're looking at how to do that.
Okay. Yeah, maybe when you come back with some more info, I mean, I think this question of sort of, allocation of staff expense to capital projects. I mean, I know this is something at the city as well that, it's evolved over time. And I think, there's some, additional constraints we're working, under as a city, but I think it'd be good just to get a sense of, do you feel confident right now that you've got the sort of good, time tracking stuff in place, that we're also just not missing opportunities to make sure that if it is even this pre-designed stuff, do we have those capital projects set up in the budget where you can start allocating early on, or just I guess a little bit more explanation around that. And if it's really not, if the labor is not going into capital projects, then maybe just a little bit better understanding of what's that extra operating cost then associated with those, if it wasn't actually going into some of the capital projects. I think it'd be helpful to understand.
We'll answer all those questions for you.
Thank you.
Okay. So Michael, you have a couple other things?
I do. Just hang on here. So let me see. All right.
Michael, Greg had his hand up, but I guess he
Go
can.
ahead, Greg.
I'm sorry, I had one question. I couldn't find the button to raise my hand quickly enough. So I don't need an answer for this today, but I have a question for you and Bill for this discussion when we talk about it. As Grant alluded to, right, at the city, we have a real need, in fact, to capitalize human, workers because of our budget constraints. I don't know if you guys are under that same, if the district is. So is there an advantage to, this is a question, to not capitalizing staff? Because that, depending on how you fund that, right, that just means you pay for their salaries for 20 years on the bonding.
That's right.
Versus paying it out of pocket in cash, which is where we're trying to go anyway. So that's just a question. Again, no answer needed today, but I'd like to hear Bill's take on that.
That's a valid point.
Mhm.
Grant, you have a comment? I don't want to get into a debate on this because it's not an agenda item. So, but
I understand. Yeah, I just want to also I appreciate Greg's clarification there, and so also in terms of information that would be helpful for me. So there's the question of like cash financing part of it, but I guess in my mind also the important part is related to kind of rate setting and this question that's been on our plate for a while of like intergenerational, how much are we paying, our ratepayers today paying versus in the future. So for me, capital versus operating tugs at that question. So just as you're preparing your information, if you could kind of speak to that question, if it were, if it's operating, then it's this year, then theoretically it's the people that are using our services right now, versus if it is, for capital projects, you'd think that gets paid over time. So just some more information along those lines would be helpful.
yeah, I think it's a big interesting discussion as we had last year with the budget and moving to more rate for some of the smaller projects. Okay. So Michael, why don't you move on?
Okay. Very helpful feedback. If you can go to the next slide, please. Thought I'd like sharing some of the things that are going on. This is Matthew Ridenkirk. He's our lubrication technician. And the district has a program that lubricates pumps and motors and to make sure that we have the adequate lubrication. And the program's goal is really to catch equipment failure before it happens and extend the useful life of our assets. And when we're looking at oil samples, we're looking at the acid number, particle counts, and metal content. And this helps us determine the lubricant's compatibility with our equipment. And it helps us to determine and predict when a piece of equipment is failing by just seeing the metal content when our bearings being worn are wearing out. And this is a critical part of our reliability centered maintenance program and being prevention focused, and just lubrication and oil analysis is just one critical part of that work. Look at the next slide, please. This is Chad Peterson. He's a lead worker in facilities maintenance. And in December, we were able to acquire a new salts and sand spreader. And this is replacing a 14-year-old spreader well, actually, this one could do sand, but it does more than that. It could put down a liquid product as well. And it replaced a 14-year-old salt spreader. And this has really 3 goals: to reduce salt usage, to be more effective in how we use salt and calibrate the equipment. It provides a higher degree of safety because pre-activation of the salt with this model will result in roads de-icing quicker and being safer for employees who are working around the plant all day, and then gives us increased reliability that the materials here resist corrosion, and the components have fewer failure modes by just how this system is designed. So I just wanted to share with you that we're trying to walk the talk with salt use, and this is one of the operational things we've implemented for this winter season to make that happen. So with that, that's my report. President Hubble, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, sorry, Grant, you have a question?
Yeah, real quick comment on the salt spreader, and thanks for the update on that. Just really appreciated the Wisconsin Saltwise content that's happening this week. So just mostly want to make sure folks were aware of that. You know, glad that we're supporting those efforts. And I think this is future, if it's future agenda, I just wanted to suggest an update on that program around water softener adjustments. And if there's been an update shared recently and I just missed it, maybe you could just send something, Michael, or otherwise maybe the commission could get an update on that kind of calibration program. Seems like worthwhile topic for a future agenda.
Put that on a future agenda.
Thanks.
Okay, that'll take us to Paul, the regulatory and legal.
Hey, Tom, before you leave, Wilson, can I ask Michael?
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Tom. What's that?
I just wanted to lower my hand before I forget.
Okay.
Okay, so, and Michael, maybe you can help me with this as part of your update a little bit. The last Dane County Towns Association membership meeting, the group asked a couple questions. There were some concerns about the Badger Mill Creek item, and there were some questions raised about additions to the district for certain town residents that may be close to a main or a service line of some type. Anyway, I got those. I couldn't attend the meeting. I gave a report, which I do for every meeting. I couldn't attend it, but I got an email from Renee Lauber, who's the executive director, and she requested, you know, an answer to some of these questions, or at least some kind of input. So I kind of got Michael involved with some emails, and it sounds like there's going to be a meeting where he's going to talk about the Badger Mill Creek issue and some concerns that were raised about moving water from the Sugar River watershed, which I'm sure he can answer. But I wanted to bring that up, that's something that Michael's going to be working on with the Dane County Towns Association.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Good report. Lisa Coleman, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I think before we go into the regulatory update, I think perhaps we missed the capital project update that was part of CED, I think, right?
No, the capital projects update comes under 5D.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Regulatory, the quorum.
Sorry, forgive me.
Okay.
New to this.
Okay, so we go to, at least that's where it's on the agenda. Paul, I think we're ready for you now.
Okay, great. Well, I have 2 things for you this morning. First is just a quick summary of legal services for the past month. And relatively speaking, a quieter month to end the year. We did have some questions on open records. we focused on the contract side, both with some review of some district property issues, as well as the use of intergovernmental agreements, which are some issues that we'll be looking at in the coming months. From a regulatory standpoint, again, we had some PFAS issues, some review on the Badger Mill Creek and comments on that. There were a couple of somewhat unusual issues. There was a question about a certain waste reception that was received and potential enforcement questions, as well as whether Section 4F of the Federal Highway Act had any impact on easements that were involved in a particular project. We did also largely wrap up our standard contracts review, which we've been undertaking over the course of the past year. We've spent quite a bit of time in the last couple of months on easements, and particularly with respect to condemnation issues. And one of the things that was interesting, at least for me, is to realize that there are some federal condemnation requirements that we had to take a look at. And I asked myself this question, look, I've been doing this for 40 years. Why am I now just coming across federal condemnation requirements with clean water funds? Well, it turns out that there has been this requirement for application of the federal law for clean water fund projects for certain designated projects. Up until this year, Milwaukee had consumed a high enough percentage of the federal dollars that no other community in the state really had to deal with that. Well, the kind of downside with all of the additional infrastructure funding that is coming is that there are now other communities that are falling outside of the percentages, and the district being one. So really, for the first time, because of the increased funding, we now have to deal with how does the state law condemnation process mix with the federal process. So, you know, it's one of those things, you learn something new every day, and I think we were able to sort it out, but kind of an interesting side note on that. But that's all I have on legal services, and I'd be glad to move to the next topic if there aren't any questions.
Okay, anybody have any questions? Move to the next topic, Paul.
Okay, and here is our long-awaited and greatly anticipated review of quorum and voting requirements. So you have the memo, and I won't read through or get into the legalese, but I just want to highlight a couple of, you know, big picture or takeaway items. And the first is, you know, as Michael mentioned in the policy book, we begin with Chapter 200 as our statutory authority. But something that we always have to keep in mind is that our district is governed by Subchapter 1. Most of Chapter 200 is in Subchapter 2, and that is unique to Milwaukee. And there's all kinds of things in Subchapter 2 about voting and budgeting and all kinds of things. And it's always tempting to say, oh, well, here's a topic in Chapter 200 that deals with this issue. But if it's in Subchapter 2, it's not us. So we look at the things in Subchapter 1. On the question of quorum, the simple answer is that for the district, a majority will always be 5, regardless of the number of vacancies. So because that is based on the total number of members that constitute the commission. Voting requirements for normal matters is a majority, and that is based on the members present, not the total number of commission members. So if there are all 9 commissioners present, 5 would be required to authorize an action. But if we just have the bare minimum quorum of 5, as few as 3 could authorize an action. So I think it's important that, you know, when we're looking at important items, to keep those things in mind and make sure that we have, you know, a good turnout for those meetings. That then gets us to this question of supermajority, and this was part of the enactment when the commission was restructured to a 9-member commission. There were these requirements for a supermajority, and the supermajority here is defined differently than the supermajority for purposes of Milwaukee under subchapter 2. A 3/4 majority is required, and it's 3/4 of the members who are entitled to a seat. And in my opinion, what that means is if there is a vacancy, the members entitled to a seat are only those that are currently on the commission. So this is one of those cases, if there is a vacancy and we have one of these issues, the 3/4 majority may be calculated a little differently. But assuming we have a 9-member commission and everybody has a seat, then 3/4 of that would be a vote of at least 7 members. I think one of the questions that's come up a couple of times, and I think this is, it's not so much a matter of the quorum or voting, but a matter of, okay, when does this supermajority issue apply? And the statute sets forth 2 categories, and I think it's important really to look at those closely. The first is if there is a policy, rule, regulation, etc., that does not apply uniformly to all geographical areas of the district. So we can change policies and rules. We just need to do it uniformly. So the action we were taking today, for example, on the policy book, that applies, you know, across the board, does not require a supermajority. But if we were going to be doing things that's based on geography, that's different, that we were going to treat, for example, the outlying communities differently than the city of Madison. That would be something that would require a 3/4 majority. But again, just to be clear, other kinds of distinctions, whether it's customer classes or different kinds of pollutants, things that are not geographic distinctions, are things that do not require that majority. So it's the geographic issue is the first one. The second one is any change in the methods used to finance capital projects or to finance operation of the districts. And as I mentioned here, the key is a change in methods of financing operations. So to me, that means something other than the routine passage of budgets or adoption of service charges. It really, I think, gets to the question of, are there going to be changes in the methods? I mean, I think one example that we had was how we assess connection charges. That's a change in our methodology, not just a number change or an adoption of a charge. It's a change in how we did connection charges. So that would be the type of thing that would require a 3/4 majority. But again, the routine kinds of things would not. Then we're just back to a majority of the people present. So, you know, this is one of those things where, you know, if you'd ask me tomorrow to recite exactly what this is, I'd say I'd have to look at this memo because it does have, you know, a certain amount of, technicality to it. But I thought having at least in written form, if there is a question that comes up, hopefully this will provide some guidance. So I'd be glad to entertain any questions.
Okay, any questions for Paul? So Paul, I have a question. Say we have, you know, let's use Badger Mill Creek since that's kind of on our radar.
Yeah.
Say so that affects only a certain part of a geographic part of the district, if we were to cut off the stream flow, does that require, say that we get all the reports and one of the options is, let's just cut off the flow to Badger Mill Creek? Does that require a 3/4 because it's a change in policy that affects only part of the district? Even though, you know, it's everybody's flow, but the out, you know, it's outfall.
Well, that's one of those areas that is, you know, a little bit more challenging. You know,
Yeah.
I think that you know, my advice is where you have a challenging, you know, issue, that there could at least be an argument that this is a geographically based thing, that the safer thing to do would be to have a supermajority vote for that type of operation. I mean, from my personal perspective, I think that this is a larger operation of the district as a whole, and the fact that it has an impact on one portion of the district does not make it geographical any more than approving a project. For example, apart from Badger Mill Creek, we're doing some interceptors out into Verona. Well, that affects one area, but it's part of the routine operations of the district. So, you know, I think we need to look at that carefully, but I think that when we're talking about a policy issue, which is somewhat controversial like Badger Mill Creek, it may be prudent, even if not required, to make sure we've got a good solid majority.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing there. Grant, you have your hand.
Yeah, thank you. This was really helpful, Paul. And I have some questions in the same vein here. So I guess one suggestion would be at City of Madison, we publish on the agenda if an item does require a supermajority. And, you know, if not, then just simple majority. I think that would be helpful for commissioners as well as the public, and kind of proactively, especially if there are controversial ones, you know, have that be published on, you know, on the agenda. And then I do, I wasn't quite clear on the specific language, but I had the same sense, I think, that you just described, that we need to be careful to distinguish between geographically based policy and projects or other sort of operational actions that only affect one place. Because if we start going in that direction, almost all of our decisions are then affecting a certain geography. So yeah, I think in my mind, and obviously big decisions, and especially controversial ones, will bring in a lot of policy questions. But I think even a decision on those controversial projects, to me, seems like it's still a project-based decision. And it sounds like the intent is really, if we were going to truly establish a policy that we're going to treat a certain geography different as a matter of policy, that's where that supermajority would be invoked. So maybe just you know, some additional look into that, again, ahead of having some controversial issue that we're having discussions or arguments about that at that time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. I like your idea about putting it on the agenda. If it's a super, then we all know. Tom?
Yeah, I wanted to, Grant kind of beat me to the punch about some of the, you know, policy as opposed to the effects on a certain district to or certain area. But for instance, you know, we're talking about Badger Mill Creek. You're talking about Badfish Creek and flooding, and now we're taking a flow that hasn't been there for a long time and sending it the other way, and then that affects the whole Yahara watershed. So, you know, a lot of these things are so interconnected that I know that we want to be safe, but at the same time, we have to be a little bit prudent in how we're going to take these things on too. So just wanted to point that out, Paul, but thanks for the memo. It was good. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Ken?
Yeah, Paul, any more clarity you can provide on the geographic area topic would be helpful, I think, to the commission. And that's kind of piggybacks on Grant's comments and Tom's comments there too. If there's any precedents set on that or some more clarity, so the commission doesn't have to potentially take this into consideration on every decision that we make.
No, those are excellent points, and I'll take a further look at that. And I think Commissioner Foster's idea of putting something that might require a supermajority vote on the agenda is helpful too, because it basically forces us to think about that in advance of the commission meetings and be a little bit more prepared to when the vote actually comes up. So I will take another look at that question and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. I think Paul had the best observation is when we have controversial issues, it's probably best to have as a matter of practice, even though it may not be judicially required, is to try to get as many of the commissioners on the same line. Okay, that takes us to Lisa Coleman and her capital projects update.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I waited my turn this time. Sorry about that before. Janelle, could you give me the thing so I can share my screen?
You should be able to go ahead and share, Lisa, even without co-host, but you do have it too.
Where's the button for that?
In your Zoom panel, it should be towards the bottom of your screen.
Oh, yep, I see it. Got it. Thank you. Yeah. All right. Can you guys see that?
Yep, capital project update.
Yep.
We can see it.
Great, thanks. All right, so for today's capital project update, I wanted to do something just a little bit different. I wanted to kind of go a little bit in depth on one project rather than an overview of a bunch of projects. And so today I wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about the Lower Badger Mill Creek Interceptor phases 5 and 6. And just to be clear, there's been a lot of discussion today about the effluent discharge, also called Lower Badger Mill Creek, but this isn't that project. This is the interceptor project basically in that same watershed. So just to be clear, we're not talking about the effluent discharge issue. So is that blocked for you guys? Do you see my toolbar here? There, I moved that out of the way. Awesome. Okay. So I wanted to just take a little time with this project to sort of refresh our memory with regard to where we've been. I know many of you are longtime commissioners and you'll be probably more familiar with this than I am. So I apologize if you already know all this, but some of you are new and may not be as familiar with this project. I know Commissioner Freeze is familiar with some of this from the work with the city of Madison on this project because they've been involved in part of this as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the history and where we've been and what's been done to date. And then I want to talk about kind of the next steps and what's happening next. And then I just wanted to sort of alert you to what might be some of the challenges ahead. Just wanting to kind of bring you along with the story so that when these things come up later, it's not a surprise. So background wise, this interceptors project is kind of closely related with the Pump Station 17 project that we're also working on, and the Pump Station 17 force main relief project that we're working on. All of these projects really are related to growth and development in the Lower Badger Mill Creek drainage basin, which is Town of Middleton, Town of Verona, City of Verona, Southwest Madison. And, you know, as you all are aware, there's been in the last couple of decades, there's been a ton of growth out in this area. And so back in the early 2000s, planning for this project sort of began in order to figure out how to serve this area and get all this flowed down here to Pump Station 17, which is in Verona. And so a plan was done at that time, an engineering plan. So a design was completed to design this entire interceptor all the way from Pump Station 17 in Verona up to Midtown Road. So that was all designed back in 2006. And kind of concurrently and happening with that, the city of Madison was developing lands up in this area and needed to be able to serve that. And so north of Midtown Road, the city of Madison actually constructed this piece up here during the time frame of 2012 to 2016. And during that time, there was various, and Greg will know way more about this than me probably, but there was various temporary lift stations because the rest of the pipeline wasn't complete yet. And so most of those temporary lifts, this is like in the Hawks Landing area out there. There is still one right here where this red dot is. There's still the Midtown lift station, which is remaining, which takes flow from this area over to the east because the remainder of this pipeline isn't complete yet. So this is the last one that's remaining. And as we'll talk about, the intent is to basically get rid of that once we have gravity sewer throughout the whole length. So just a little bit of a brief recap here of what's already been built. And as I mentioned before, this part to the north already has been built by the city of Madison. There's a lift station right here. Back in 2006, after we designed the entire interceptor, we built phase 1, which is from pump station 17 in Verona up to Edward Street right here. And then in 2008, we built phase 2, which is Edward Street up to Cross Country Road, right up here. And then phase 3 was this little red part, which is Cross Country Road to Hubble Road, which is in Epic, related to Epic there. And then phase 4 was Hubble Road to PD. That was completed in 2018. So if you're following here, all this up here the pink has all been built, and then everything south of PD has already been built. And there is this missing link right here, which is this yellow line. And that's the next piece that we're looking to complete. So that's, it was originally, I think, conceived to be 1 phase, but now it's actually going to be built in 2 phases. So phase 5 and 6. So just a little bit zooming in here on phases 5 and 6, a little bit more of a close up of what's going on there. So phase 5 is here from PD all the way up to Shady Oak Lane here, where it's shown in green. That construction is anticipated to begin later in 2023. This is a agricultural area, the Marty Farm, and we're working in conjunction with the city of Verona on the Ardent Glen. There's a development project, a Viridian Homes project called Ardent Glen that's happening here. So we're working closely with the developer's engineer to coordinate on that. And then phase 6 is the next phase up to the north here that's shown in orange that ends up at that lift station we were looking at earlier at Midtown Road. Phase 6 has anticipated construction in 2024. And as I mentioned, it goes along Shady Oak Lane here, and then it goes through an existing residential area, and then up here through some agricultural lands. So a little bit more detail on what we're working on now. As I mentioned, we're working on phase 5 and 6 in design. You saw an RFP come out last year when we hired R.A. Smith to help us with that design. And as I mentioned, the entire project was totally designed in 2005, but we need a sort of a review and refresh of that design just to make sure, you know, it still makes sense. And obviously some things like wetland delineations, that kind of stuff, you know, those things basically go out of date. So we're kind of reviewing and refreshing that design as needed. And so we're currently working with R.A. Smith to refine the route and the profile through this area through phase 5 and 6. We're working with Viridian on phase 5, as I mentioned, to coordinate it with their development plans. And then we're planning for phase 6 in 2024. So you can see we're, you know, this is kind of right now they're thinking on the, where the 2006 alignment is in blue, and then where we're thinking the better spot for it now based on current conditions is the red. So it's pretty close, but just tweaking it for updates. We did hold an in-person open house in December 2022. So last month, before the holidays, to try to start talking to some of these folks that live in this area here. So a little more detail on phase 5. As I mentioned, we're working in conjunction with the developer on this piece. And so this is kind of their planned neighborhood, and then we're running through kind of the stormwater corridor of their neighborhood, and working in conjunction with them so that we can get access to our interceptor through a planned bike path that they're doing back there, which should work out very nice for us. But one thing I wanted to call your attention to with regard to this project, so PD is down here, and we will be needing to do kind of a little mini project right in here at this just north of PD to deal with. There's a sag in the existing pipe that we need to repair. And we had planned to do that as part of the phase 5 project when we do the entire project later, except that the monkey wrench here is that the city of Verona is widening PD. And so the repair that we need to do kind of quickly in conjunction with their project rather than wait until it's complete. So we'll be bidding out just a little mini project to relay a little bit of pipe and drop a manhole in down here. So I just wanted to call your attention to that because you'll be seeing that come through. You'll likely be seeing an item to approve bids for that little mini project that we're calling phase 5A on the commission agenda, likely in early March. So I just wanted to give you a heads up so that you know what that's about. All right, and then a little bit more on phase 6. So I don't want to say that phase 5 is straightforward. All projects have some challenges, but phase 5 is definitely a little bit more straightforward than phase 6. So phase 6 is going to be a challenge. It goes along Shady Oak, down the middle of the street here, which will obviously have some traffic control impacts. As you may guess from the name Shady Oak, there's some nice trees along there. So we're working on trying to protect those to the extent possible. And then the more challenging part goes here, right through here, which is goes through some basically backyards of properties that are on this street here, which is Nordell Hill Road, and this street here, which is Rolling Meadows Road. And so there's a on these two, this one is an aerial photo, but then this one is more like a neighborhood plan type view. And so you can see that there's a ephemeral, it's a ephemeral stream. It doesn't flow all the time, but there is a kind of a drainage way through here. There's steep topography. There's kind of a ravine type situation through these backyards. And so this piece is going to be challenging. We're also coordinating up here in this area where it goes through ag lands. We're coordinating with, these lands are currently in the town, but we're coordinating with the city of Madison's future kind of development neighborhood plan for that area, where there's some potential paths that we may be able to capitalize on for access for our to our interceptor. Also coordinating with, this is a plan, this isn't a done deal yet, but the Ice Age Trail is planned to kind of come through here. So we'll be talking with Ice Age Trail folks too. Let's see. Yeah, and so I just wanted to bring this one up because, you know, it's going to be, as I mentioned, steep wooded terrain through here. There's proximity. This is Richardson's Cave is right here. There's karst topography, which is basically a fractured limestone aquifer. And so there's some concerns with the neighbors' wells in this area that we're working through. And there's just, you know, as you can imagine with going through backyards here, there's a neighborhood opposition to this, and we're going to need easements from those folks. And so we don't have a lot of options. We don't really have any other options because this route is dictated by topography. It's if we go away from this, we're getting, you know, 40 feet deeper because of the way the topography is. We need to build this here. It's kind of the missing link. the stuff to the north has already been built, the stuff to the south has already been built. So this is really where it needs to go. And as I mentioned, we're talking to the neighbors, we're refining that route, we're getting it, as best we can in the best place. But there's really not options other than going through this area. So I just want to bring it up, now because, hearing loud and clear, folks, the discussion when we ran the last relocation order through, it was sort of a surprise that we were even talking about real estate acquisition, that kind of thing. That was for a different project, but, I'm just bringing it to our attention because we will be needing to do private easement acquisition here as well. And, we will follow the process and we will work with the neighbors as best we can, but it may come to condemnation for some of these properties. So I just want to bring you along with that story so that, obviously it's not a surprise as we share more details on that later and keep you updated on that story. So really, I just kind of wanted to provide an update and let you know, stay tuned for further updates, but I wanted to call your attention to a couple of those things just so that as we proceed, we've at least heard a little of this story before. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Grant, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa, and thanks for giving this early view on it. I think that's exactly what I had in mind when asking some of those questions around needing to take some of the legal actions in the future. So I appreciate getting the heads up early on this project. In terms of that city plan that you referenced, like on the phase 6 map, for example. The city, I think, just very, very, very recently updated that plan. And as part of that, the Transportation Policy and Planning Board that I sit on recommended making a sort of bike path connection, something like the alignment of phase 6. And during that discussion, I think word from our engineering team was that this kind of future project might be because of some of those same challenges with terrain, et cetera, might be the best opportunity to make that recommended bike connection through there. So I don't know if you've had any recent conversations, or if not, maybe you could speak with, like Chris Pedikowski, for example, from city engineering, and just get a better sense of sort of viability for that, and keep that also as a consideration. I know you mentioned sort of coinciding with a bike path for phase 5, and this was just sort of identified as kind of a critical connection as part of the updated plan here.
Yeah, I know that R.A. Smith has had some conversations already with Madison, and those will continue. So we'll see where that leads. That said, I will say that also having worked on bike path projects in the past, folks that are not excited about a sewer being in their backyard are also probably not going to be terribly excited about a bike path in their backyard either. So, we'll see how that all shakes out. But,
yeah, well, that's part of why I bring it up. I mean, we actually did hear as part of that plan update. I mean, there were, I think, just 1 or 2 folks that sort of said they're not interested in that. And that's, of course, something that we've dealt with for bike paths on projects as well. And I mean, it seems also very likely that people will not be happy about either of the two. So having both of them, may not really change their support or opposition to the project. And I think there's a tremendous community benefit to trying to get that connection if we can coincide.
Yeah. Another interesting challenge there is because those lands aren't, while the city is planning for those lands, they're not actually in the city yet. So that makes it a little tricky too. Yeah, well, but the fact that it is on the updated plan, that is sort of controlling in terms of the subdivision, et cetera, that happens in the future. So in terms of expectations around, having a path there once it's in the plan, that really does kind of set the tone. So I think we're in good shape from that perspective on the city side.
Okay, thanks, Grant. Greg, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to do Paul's job here, as he would. I just want to say that since Lisa mentioned there's going to be likely condemnations here, we cannot condemn for a bike path, right? So you can condemn for a maintenance path to maintain the interceptor that you guys get, but that not, you know, if the maintenance path gets used to the bike path, you're starting to tread ground that Paul needs to weigh in on. But anyway, I just want to remind everybody of that. So.
Yep, thank you, Greg. I remember that change at the legislature. Okay. I think, are you done, Lisa?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Well, thank you. We look forward to hearing more on this project as you progress, and we have to do the I can't remember what it's called for the condemnation.
The
We should be
relocation
doing,
order.
yeah, the relocation order, right? We
Yep,
should be doing those regularly, I think, for any
Yep.
project. Yep.
that's the plan.
Okay, so that will take us to Alan. You got the operations report.
Did I lose you?
We heard you.
We can hear you.
Everything cut out really abruptly, so, okay. Good morning, commissioners, guests. My name is Alan Grooms. I'm operations manager for the district, and I'll be presenting the operations and maintenance report for covering December, last report of 2022. So go ahead and get started here. Looking at the plant performance metrics, we've got the normal dashboard metrics that we've become accustomed to. The effluent CBOD5, 3.2 milligrams per liter, well below permit limits and within normal historical ranges. Ammonia levels at 0.13 is about what we would expect this time of year. Again, well below the effluent limits and within historical ranges. You know, I remember harping on this one, suspended solids earlier. Again, that's come down in line. Good performance overall from the plant. But again, kind of keeping in mind that linkage there, that the effluent phosphorus numbers, not completely, but largely could be driven by this suspended solids. So when these numbers start to drop, the phosphorus also starts to drop. There's independent elements of that, but some of that with the biological phosphorus, a lot of the solids that would come out of the plant would be biological in nature. And so, you know, those are going to contain an enhanced degree of content of phosphorus because of the fact we've intentionally designed our process to concentrate the phosphorus there and to facilitate our handling of it in the liquid stream. And then our chloride numbers, again, well below the permit limit for this time of year, but near the top of our historical range. Largely a function, you know, I think December weather could be part of it. And we've also had still continued fairly dry conditions. So not a lot of dilution, that flow. So any questions on the plant performance metrics? And if you see me looking side-eye on the camera, I've got the monitor that's showing me if anyone's raising questions is over here. So that's I'm not thinking somebody's sneaking up on me. For the December resource recovery, looking at the numbers for clean water, this is water returned to the environment. You can see that's for all intents and purposes the same as 2021. So continue that throughout 2022, we've stayed fairly dry overall, and that largely determines how much we're returning to the environment. Obviously, we're treating and returning what we receive. You know, so this, I know at one point I'd heard our collection systems engineer, Jen Holobus, refer to, you know, this is probably a pretty good metric for what our average dry weather flow is. And I would tend to agree with that. This is shown to be a fairly stable flow through this period. So that may seem like trivia right now, but that is potentially good design information down the road as we see that uptick. So as we look to continue our I&I programs here at the district. Biogas production was seeing this trending during the year as a high value, and as you can see, it is noticeably higher than the previous 2 years. So, and then reused effluent, this is reclaimed water. It's offsetting city potable water. That usage, we've seen that uptick as well in 2022. So any questions on this slide? Okay. Moving on to the other resource recovery slide, biosolid storage. This is what's in the Metrico storage tanks. So at the end of December, we were 28.6% full. So, that's a reflection of the capacity to get to store as of this morning, and this is a little bit more recent. So, but we're still looking at storage that should be good into end of May, beginning of June. So we're in really good shape overall on that, barring an extremely wet spring. And by extremely wet, it's going to be a lot bigger issues than us getting biosolids out. There'll be a lot of farmers and flooding probably that are people that are upset. Metrogo cake, we didn't make any more through the year, so this number's been stable since about April of 2022. So these will shift down. We'll start, we do have some plans to make a little bit of Class A cake product here in 2023. Struvite production, again, it's trended down just a little bit. We are looking at some production enhancements and some seeing if we can adjust this number and get this to come back up a little bit, back up into the 600 range is where we had been prior to this. So some of this may have been attributable to some changes during the pandemic, but I think operationally we don't necessarily believe that to be completely the case. So we're looking at trying to turn that portion around. And there's an aspect of this too that has to do with when the truck left. So a truck that leaves on December 31st gets credited to 2022. If it leaves on January 2nd, it's 2023 production. So this is a little bit inexact, especially when you're looking at month to month. So that can skew the numbers a little bit. And then our Metrogrow production, this is our function of what we're sending to the storage tank. So again, you can see that this is basically the same numbers we had in 2021. So no real changes in that respect. So any questions on this slide? Or any other operational questions? There is a more detailed packet in the commission handout, but if there's no questions, I have nothing more.
Okay, thank you, Alan. I don't see any hands up. So, okay. That will move us to future meeting schedule. Excuse me. You can click on the link in the packet. So the next meeting in February will be in-person meeting at the district. And that will include the study session on the item that we were discussing earlier with the commission policy handbook. And then we discussed some other things that will be coming up to related to the labor and the budget. And I kind of see that as two issues. One is the budgetary issue that we have to handle, and then the second is a policy issue as to how to handle what we should do in that regard. I think Greg Freeze brought up an excellent observation that we're moving to more capital projects. It's a little different than cities and villages that have the levy limits. We don't have levy limits. But then we have to be, so do we do that? But then of course we raise, so we'll have to take a look at how much that would affect annually the impact of our, and that could vary every year, of our rate structure. So, but I kind of see two issues on that, Michael, the policy issue, the budget issue, and then the policy issue, what we want to do. And so I don't know if we're going to need a study session on the policy one or not, but we can discuss that later. Okay, so that goes to the future agenda topics. Any other business?
President Hubble, before we adjourn, and I just want to bring up, this is more of a process consideration. Usually when I put the agenda together, I try to decide what's an agenda topic under item 4, what is a CED update, which is an update. And I know many times, at least in the recent past, we've had situations where things have been under update that are fairly controversial and the commission wants to discuss them more. And which is really not, since it's not on the agenda, we can't have discussion. So what I'm going to experiment with is placing some of these items that I anticipate may generate more discussion, such as the lower Badger Mill Creek discussion this morning, or quorum considerations, and move them up to a topic. And the implications of that are that I'll be putting a brief commission agenda report together. And while there may not be a commission action, it will allow some discussion and facilitated discussion. So President Hubble and I, we meet every other week before the agenda, and we can discuss what types of topics are appropriate for that. And I typically want to keep our agendas efficient and have as many reports as possible and not put them in topic areas. But I also want to make sure we have enough space for the commission to discuss things of importance to them. So if you see a few more things coming up in the topic area, that's why. And if it doesn't work, I'll go back to the old practice.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Michael. You read my mind because I was going to bring that up at our next, I had made a note where we were talking. Well, we were doing, Alan was doing his report. And one of the questions I had in my mind was whether or not Lisa's report should have been an agenda item. Because not just because of the discussion, but because it's a topic of significant interest to the public. And so that, yeah. Okay, so we will talk about that with our meetings. We set the agenda. Okay, any other comments? Okay, so do we have a motion to adjourn?
To Wilson, I'll move we adjourn, please.
Motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by
Clark, I'll second that.
second by Commissioner Clark to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? None, motion carries. Everybody have a good remainder of the week. Enjoy the little bit of snow we're getting.
Yeah.
Take care.
Everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you
Take
later.
care.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.